In the Heian court, your rank kind of determined how important you were. When you think about rank, it kind of like, I suppose it's kind of like your status, your grade level, and the higher your rank, the better your grade, the more important you became. And of course, at the very top is the emperor, and well, then the nobility and stuff, and all that is depending on your family, how you were born, and that's not something you can actually change. You can't change who your parents are, and so and it doesn't matter how good you are at doing something or how bad you are at doing it. It's your rank. Being born into a high-ranking family was more important than your personal qualities or your skills. So, in the Heian court hierarchy, there are 9 main ranks, and we're going to talk about that more, and we'll do a worksheet on it. But as you think about the hierarchy, the same thing is true in different countries. In Europe, in the class system, that's what we're talking about. Everything was defined by your rank. The 9 ranks, you also had like a upper and lower class, the senior and junior class. So that if you added up all the different ranks and all the different subclasses of them, there's over 30 of them, 30 subclasses, and each rank has specific rights and privileges that you get to do, and different rules about conduct. So everything is was written down. Everything was like what you were allowed to do and what you weren't allowed to do. The members of each rank had different types of houses. Different types of the bigger the house, the smaller the house, the type of house, carriages. The even just how you traveled around, whether or not you get to have a big wagon or a small one. How many servants you had, the number of folds in the fans you carry. Now, I remember the Japanese fans. They're just like they're made out of paper, and they're folded and used to. If you ever see a Japanese fan, they're pretty elaborate. But the whole point is, all of the ranks, you could tell which rank somebody belonged to by the way they were dressed, by the way they acted, and how many servants they had. You could easily tell, and so it was you couldn't switch ranks very easily. Even your clothes, what color clothes you could wear, depended on your rank. The height of the gatepost in front of the family's home. The gatepost is every family had their house, and they had a wall. If the more important your family is, the bigger the wall they had, and the gatepost is basically the door. The more important your family was, the more elaborate gatepost and the higher you could have it. If you weren't that important, then if you were lucky enough to have a wall, then your gatepost had to be kind of much lower, and not as decorated. Right? In addition, it also crime and punishment. If you were the more important you were, the less punishment you received. The less important, the harsher the punishment. So, is it fair? No, of course not. But it was kind of the way it was. The rich, important people got to get richer and richer because they had better jobs. The poorer people, well, less important. They couldn't get important jobs, so they couldn't make as much money. Even something as simple as a fan. If a paper fan, you make a folded paper and use it to fan yourself because it's hot. And in Japan, during the summertime, it is super hot. It's muggy. It's really temperature in the high 80s. It's really hot and muggy, and so everybody had a fan. And the fan that you kind of got kind of also depended on your rank. The higher the rank, men of the first, second, and third rank, they had fans with 25 folds. Now, 25 folds doesn't seem to mean that much to us, but having paper folded 25 times made it much more intricate, made it lighter, made it more beautiful based on the pattern that you could draw on it. Fans of the lower ranks had 12 folds, so they were much bigger pieces of paper and much harder to fold, and well, not didn't quite work as well. So this is another example of the, the higher the rank, the better quality of stuff you had. Beauty and fashion. When you talk about fashion, it's not just the kind of clothes you wear. It's also how you carry yourself, how your style, the hair, the makeup, and that might not seem important to you right now, but for some people it was extremely important. And being able to do that, to use makeup, to have nice hair, to have nice clothes, it was also a mark of being, well, rich and more well educated, because the better educated you were, the more you know about fashion, and so that you could look nicer, right? So Heian society, fashion, beauty, elegance, that was super important. So in order that the highest, the best would be to be described as yoki, which is good. You had to be from an important family. You had to look nice, and you had to be sensitive to beauty, nature, poetry, and art. That means that you could look at something and you can tell if it is a nice picture or it is not. If it is a nice piece of music or it is not. If it is nice clothes or not. And in order to do that, you had to be educated. You had to know much more than your average person. And the same thing, I guess, is kind of true today. The more you know about the world around you, the better educated you are at fashion, and the nicer you look. So that's kind of what it's all about. The ability to recognize beauty was valued over qualities like generosity and honesty. So somebody who appreciates good food, good art, good looking things, that was more important. And so it might seem a little bit shallow, but that was one of the things that was super important to people of the Heian period. Now, at this time, most of the people in the world didn't really take care of themselves that well. If you're poor, then you're not going to be worried about, like, how fancy your clothes are, what kind of hair you have, and cleanliness. In fact, in Europe, people thought bathing, taking a bath, was actually made you sick. Japan, though, is totally different. In Japan, people groom themselves. That means that you take care of yourself, that you cut your nails, cut your hair, you shave, do constantly clean yourself to make yourself much nicer. For men in the Heian period, small pointy beards were considered attractive, right? So here's our picture. You have this little small pointy beard. That's what the men had. And for women, long hair was very important for was considered beautiful. If you're poor, then you're gonna have short hair because it's easier to take care of. But if you are rich, then you can take care of your long hair, and it's if you're working hard, it's hard to have long hair. So it's just another sign of you being rich and being more prestigious. During the Heian period, white teeth was unattractive. I don't know why. That back then, if your teeth were too white, it just, I guess, looked unnatural. I guess because nobody else had white teeth. So if you take care of your teeth, they blackened their teeth with, well, basically with ink. You made a ink from iron soaked in tea or vinegar, and they would cover their teeth with it so that it wouldn't be too white. How you smell, your body odor, was super, super important. And well, some of you know that some people, well, they're kind of smelly. Especially teenage boys, once they've been running around, they kind of smell really bad. And that was considered like the worst. So in order to smell better, Japanese people took baths, but they also used scents. Scents meaning, like, well, basically perfume. And you get perfume from all different places. Flowers. You get perfume from oil. And people made stuff to make you smell good. And that was what they did. This was fashion. And the worst thing is to smell bad. It still is today. For women in the Heian court, being able to make yourself up, including using makeup. People were using makeup back then. people have always been using makeup. It's just what the makeup is made out of was, well, as all it changes. In the Heian court, white was considered beautiful. The paler you are, and in a lot of Asian cultures, it still is kind of today. Being pale means that you're not out in the sun, and the more you're out in the sun, that means you're the poorer you are because you are working on the outside, and if you are rich, then you don't have to go outside as much. And so, women, Japanese women, even still today, value a very pale look, and so they would use white powder to make themselves look, well, almost white. And so, if you look at pictures of Japanese women from that time, they look white. It's very, very pale. They put touches of red on their cheeks and lips, and well, they used to pluck their eyebrows. The women, well, actually, people still do pluck their eyebrows today, but they went to the extreme of plucking them out entirely and just painting them on. And first time I saw somebody do that, it freaked me out. But some people do that, and it's still popular with some women today. Women's clothing needed to be beautiful. If you wear ugly clothing, then people looked down on you in court and showed that you were not important and talked badly about you. So an aristocratic woman, so a rich woman in court, might wear as much as 12 silk underrobes. So if you look at this picture of the Japanese woman, she's wearing, the silk robe, the kimono, but underneath that she might have up to like 12 different, silk underwear, basically. And remember, silk was super, super expensive at this time. So the more silk you had, well, the richer you were. Now, if you were a part of the royal court, it means you're there at the emperor's palace, and you are basically, staying there, and sometimes you're helping the emperor. But if you're rich and powerful, and you're, not working, because remember, women weren't really allowed to do a whole lot of work back then you had plenty of time for fun. And Japanese people in the Heian time, they liked having fun. So what did they do? Well, they did sports, they did games, they did contests. The men loved watching horse races, which is a horse running around and racing each other. Archery, which is bows and arrows and shooting, and sumo wrestling. Sumo wrestling is still popular today. There's a ring, and the object is to push your opponent out of the ring. And today the sumo wrestlers are huge. They're over 300 pounds usually, and they don't wear a lot of clothing because, well, the more clothes you have, the easier it is to grab hold of you and push you out. So wrestling is not about throwing your opponent to the ground. It's pushing him out of the circle. Right? Groups of courtiers, that means people at the court, played kamari, which is you take a ball and you kick it back and forth, and you try to keep it up in the air and don't let it touch the ground. The game was played in elegant robes, so you had to you did that kind of like a uniform, but you had to look fancy while doing it, so it becomes really, really difficult. Right? So people love to play games, sports, even back then. から蹴りが始めます。ああ、すごいすごい。メンバー変わるんだって疲れると。そういうのを聞いたら、あなた変わるでしょってまだやってない人いるから。だんだん上手になってくるね、やっぱり慣れてきて最初より、何回か続くようになってきたもん。最初に最初 Women couldn't play men's sports, so they played their own. They played one called rango. Sorry, the object was to balance stones on your finger, on one finger, and the more stones you could balance on there, that won you the game. Right? Dancing was an important skill for the noble. Dancing was part of nearly every festival, every party, and so everyone participated, and the better you are at it, the more dances you knew, the more important you were, and the more everyone looked up at you. And so if you didn't participate, people looked down on you socially. And it's one of those things, people look, there are some people who are considered more popular, some people who are considered less popular. It's always been that way. And it's always, probably always will. And sometimes it's fair based on people really like you, or it's not fair just because people have certain things or are better looking, right? Bakagu is a traditional Japanese dance. It tells a story. Dancers wear masks and they act out the story, and it's very dramatic. It's a drama, and so this is how you learn history, right? It's so here's a picture of a traditional costume from Bakagu. This is the Amida Buddha, created by one of Heian's greatest craftsmen, a guy named Joko. It was created from a single piece of wood and is the only surviving piece that still exists today. The sculptors from the Heian period believed in wood. They created huge, amazing, intricate sculptures, sometimes from one single piece of wood, and that was what Joko did. He worked for Fujiwara Michinaga and is regarded as the greatest masterwork of Heian sculpture. One of his, this Buddha here in this picture, is a recreation of his. He made it. It unfortunately burned down in a fire in about the year 1200, and so they recreated it using bronze. And bronze is metal, and at one point this sculpture was covered in gold paint, and if you go there you can still see kind of like the traces of the gold paint still on there. This is the second most photographed thing in Japan. Do you know the first? Well, anyway, this is the example of the sculpture and the art that was still super important, because remember, beauty was regarded as the most important thing, and that's why Japan still regards beauty and art as super important and wanting to be the best at something.